Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us on the Barre Beat podcast, live from 185 North Main Street in the 802 Scoop Studios. I already messed it up.
No,
That's
you're
okay.
good.
Raylene will fix it.
Yeah. Of course.
And of course, with us,
all kinds of stuff.
with us tonight, we have the ever lovely Raylene, which she's probably getting sick of me saying.
Well, you always try to butter me up, but it never works.
It doesn't.
But you are
No.
lovely and always.
Well, thank
ever.
you.
And I don't
Thank
always
you.
butter you up.
No.
I try though.
Right.
And then, of course, we've got Michael Deering. We've also got one of his a couple of his kids in the studio too.
Oh, we do.
Which,
Yep.
which I am definitely going to show folks. Come here, Oliver's one of them. Ready, Oliver? Come here.
You're
come
being
here.
spotlighted.
Come here, buddy.
Oh, say hi.
This is Oliver. Ready? Oliver. Isabella.
Hello, bye. Yep.
And then you have one more in the back.
Yep. I have my oldest daughter, Leah, in the back.
Yeah.
She's doing some homework.
Well, that's part of parenting is sometimes you got to roll with the punches, right?
Yep.
No, it is. It really is about being flexible. Like, also by doing things that people are flexible with. Because I know I have kids. Like, you guys know that I have kids sometimes. Actually, I show up to most events with kids.
Right.
It's just how we operate. Because kids are part of my life. That's actually the driving force behind what I do.
Yeah. Exactly. They're cute. We love them. We're cute. You know.
And they have their opportunities to be a pain in the ass, too.
Yeah,
But hey,
well,
when we
you
were
know
kids, I was a real big pain in the ass.
Exactly.
right.
And
I
look what I
believe
turned out
that.
to be.
Right.
I believe
Well.
that very much. All right. So with us, we want to let folks know that if you're watching and you want to ask Michael a question, because he is running for state senate and for Washington County. And I guess the first thing we'll do is what's going on and why are you running?
So really the biggest reason that I'm running is because I listen twice as much as I speak. That's something that's been a staple of everything that I do, being a community advocate. It really, being on the city council these last 2 terms, I listen twice as much as I speak. And what we've found out in our state legislature, in the state house, is that they don't listen. They kind of do their own thing. They really have their own agenda. And it's really, it's made it so Vermont is not as affordable as it could be or should be. Looking at, I've got 4 kids. I'd like to buy a house, get into that. But I can't because of the way that things constantly increase in price. Really, we're going to be priced out. And I moved back to Vermont in 2008 to raise a family, to be here, because this was where I wanted to be. And I'm starting to feel that I'm being priced out, that many people are being priced out, and they don't listen. The people that are in Montpelier aren't listening. The taxpayers, the residents, people have said, we can't afford anymore. What do? Raise the DMV fees 20%. Okay, we got a property tax increase of 13.8% statewide, and that's just the average. So, when you're talking that money is constantly coming out of your pocket, but your pay increases aren't going up at the same rate, it was time for me to really get involved. I was asked to be a write-in candidate. I had made it clear that I wasn't seeking higher office back when I was running for city council, but it was the will of the people. With over 200 votes in the August primary here just in Barre City and then within Washington County in that voting district, we secured that nomination, and I gratefully accepted and also humbly accepted. I want to represent the everyday working class people so that we have a place to call Vermont home. It's not looking like that's the future. And to me, if we're not looking at that to be the future, then people really need to get in the game.
I agree with all of that.
Well,
And then some.
and once again, folks, if you have questions, please pop them in the chat, and we'll make sure that we ask the questions. Also, click like and then share the video. And the more you comment, the more it gets pushed
view.
out there by
Yeah.
the
Well,
Facebook.
this is the opportunity for people to ask some questions.
Absolutely.
There are lots of questions, and I'll be the first person to tell you, I definitely don't have all the answers. But the biggest difference between me and many of the people that are currently elected is that I'm willing to listen twice as much as I speak. I want to hear what people have to say, and then I want to put that into play for them. Because to me, it doesn't do us any good in a representative democracy to have people elected that aren't representing our values. To me, what's been going on in Montpelier, specifically these last 2 years of the supermajority, is an agenda, is not listening to the people. And that bothers me. I'm fired up about it.
So, Glenn, good evening. And Wendy Ducey says, we need a big shake up in the legislature. I'm glad you are both running. I appreciate that. But, Michael, so one of the issues, you talk about affordability, and I know that just last night I went to Price Chopper and I bought 2 quarts of half and half and a gallon of milk, and it cost me $17, which seemed a little pricey. And I know that and I'm not blaming the store for that. I'm not blaming
The farmer.
the farmer. I'm not blaming any of them. But what I do acknowledge is that there's a lot of costs that go into that cost.
Sure.
One of them is something that's a hot topic in the state of Vermont, which is the Affordable Heat Act, which people have nicknamed as the Unaffordable Heat Act.
Yep.
And it's going to talk about the Clean Heat Standard,
Sure.
which I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, I
if
believe
you-
that's S4. There was a check back period, and from my understanding with the affordable, and we put affordable in quotes, the check back kind of came back recently. I believe it was like $1.50 to $4 a gallon added to your home heating fuel. That's a lot of money. Oh my. I mean, we're talking about potentially doubling the cost of what it's going to be to heat your home. People are already doubling down, working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, trying to provide for their families. And then what are we going to say? I heard this comment in the legislature. We're going to give them a blanket, give them a sweater. Are you kidding me? How many sweaters and blankets do we need to give out in order to cover that cost for these people to actually be warm? I mean, we have on the city end, we're talking about heating in apartments and making sure that the temperature is a certain temperature. Right. And now we're also talking about the affordable or unaffordable clean heat standard, where Vermont's doing a really good job in general on greenhouse gas emissions. Now, there's always room for improvement, but we have to make sure that they're attainable measurables.
And then we're ready, prepared.
Absolutely,
for
that we
such a
have
thing.
to be ready for those things. And to create such a policy where there was no, well, we know this is what Vermonters can afford. This is the price point that if we go any higher than that, we know we're going to break the backs of our Vermonters. And there's really been none of that. There's really been no, you know what, we know that our Vermonters can't afford this, but we're going to do it anyway because this is what the agenda is. And when we're driving an agenda and not listening to our constituents, I mean, that's a huge problem.
Yes, it is. It really is. I know when we start talking about farmers, and we're talking about heat at the moment, but the fuel cost for them, I can't even imagine what the cost of milk and other dairy products are going to end up being. I just can't imagine.
Well, look at a
money that
municipality,
they
for
spend.
example.
Yeah.
Let's look at this from the city council aspect right now. Michael, what would you say the city spends on fuel for, like, the auditorium?
Oh man,
Thousands of gallons, easily.
Yeah, I
So-
mean, I think is it 40? Is it
40,000
a year?
So if you add $40,000, even just $1 to that, your municipal budget then has to reflect that going up, even if it's just $1. Now you take that by 4, okay? You quadruple that number, and then you want your residents in the city to not only be able to afford that on the state level. So we want this program to pay to make sure that greenhouse gases are where people want them to be. We want to make sure that we're paying the renewable energy credits that are being purchased, not actually used, but being purchased. You have to buy those. So then we have the state, but then you're looking at the local level too. So then your local taxpayers are having to fit the bill. Then the state budget also is going to go up because the highway plow trucks, that takes a bunch of money. Well, that's fuel, different aspect. Sorry, got off on a different tangent with.
Well, yeah, because it's all going to be affected.
I think it's some
Regular
point,
fuel as well
you know, we're
will
going to
be
see
affected.
a higher tax on gasoline as well. That's another one of those fossil fuels that
They're trying to
that
push
the
out if they
renewable
can.
energy- Yeah, if they can push that out. So just in general, the cost that it is going to be to everyday Vermonters is just unaffordable. I can't support it.
Well, I think so I do want to, there is a question here from Wendy. She asks, what's your number one priority if you're elected? Homelessness, affordability, drug problem, so many issues, and none have easy solutions. Just curious about what's first on your plan what's first on your list and how you plan to approach fixing your number one issue.
So I appreciate the question, Wendy. I've been studying to become a trauma therapist because to me this is something that's near and dear to my heart, is how do we give people that sense of self-worth back? I think it starts off with affordability. I think that affordability is number one because these other things affect people as well. But if we can't help fund some of the programs that are going to help these people in recovery that want to get better, that want to build their lives up step by step, you can't ask someone to just pull your bootstraps up and get it done. People that are looking for help, that are in recovery. I've been in recovery for 10 years. And without the steps that I've made in life, I wouldn't be anywhere where I am. Without the people and the programs that have been in place, I wouldn't be really anywhere where I am. But so affordability is important. That if you can't afford to have an apartment, then you're probably going to fall into substance abuse because you're either going to fall into alcohol abuse, drug abuse, cigarette abuse, food abuse, gym abuse. You're going to find something
To fix the depression.
Yep, you got it.
Fill the void.
So you got to fill the void, and that's really difficult. Wendy, like you said, there's no easy solution for this. But what I think a lot of it boils down to is giving people a sense of self-worth. That when people feel that they can do good by themselves, then that builds their self-confidence. It builds their self-worth. So then when we also put good programs into place and fund them, because if we have the extra money that we're not spending on the unaffordable heat standard, we can put that into things like Turning Point. We can put things into spoken hub models of recovery programs so people that are addicted to these nasty things can get better. Whatever your crutch is, essentially, that is helping you get through life, we need to give you a better coping mechanism first and foremost, but you have to also see that you are a valuable human being.
And with that being something that is top of mind for you, are you somebody who believes or doesn't believe that we need some much stiffer, harsher penalties on the actual drug dealers themselves that are bringing this stuff into our communities, and bail reform, basic reform in the department within the Justice Department when it comes to all of this?
Two questions.
Yeah.
First question, absolutely. Stiffer penalties for drug dealers, much stiffer. The fact that people can sell drugs to people that are going to kill someone and then they walk away from court is disgusting to me. That is a disservice to every human being that walks the face of this earth. That we need to hold people accountable for what's going on. That people aren't being held accountable. And when you're not held accountable, what do? Oh, just slap me on the wrist. It's okay. Well, no. This behavior is not okay. And I understand that there is there's a huge difference between locking somebody up and throwing away the key and rehabilitating somebody that wants to be rehabilitated.
And rehabilitating somebody that's an active drug user is much different than somebody who's actively putting fentanyl or other drugs into a drug so that they can make bigger profits and bringing it into our state and selling it to our children. That's two very different things.
Absolutely.
You
And
know?
I think that we need to make it clear to people coming to the state of Vermont that your drugs aren't welcome here, that your drug dealing isn't welcome here. When my children get woken up by the state police, DEA, ATF, because they're kicking in a door in a public housing complex because there's drugs being sold there, that's unacceptable. When we allow those people to get out of jail and then continue to do the same behavior over and over and over, that's not justice.
No.
And then what? We watch these people continue to do the same thing over and over and over again, and then it's okay. No, it's not okay. And our community, Vermont, the state, needs to send a message to these people that Vermont is not a place to peddle your crap. Get your crap out of here. We don't want your garbage, number one. Like, I'm tired of it. I'm tired of seeing it on a daily basis. I'm tired of seeing the people walking Barre City that are just so messed up because people are bringing this stuff into our community and it's acceptable. The laws need to straighten out. They need to make it much more strict on these individuals that are bringing the stuff into the state. What was your second question?
Basically, for me, it's kind of the same is the bail reform.
Yeah.
A lot of people, they commit these crimes, they set bail, and within, maybe even just an hour's time, the people that they're here selling for, the people from out of state, often the head honcho of it all, is paying their bail.
Right.
They don't want them in jail talking, right?
Right.
So they're paying their bail.
Yeah.
Or bail is set, $200 or something like that.
Personal recognizance.
And
something like-
we need something that makes it a little more intimidating to want any of this to happen than what we have right now.
If you're selling drugs like that in the state of Vermont, then the bail issue, like if they have the probable cause to arrest you and they find product on you and know what's going on, I don't believe that we should be having low bails. That when these people are given a personal recognizance bail or here's your $200 bail, we're saying, all right, it's not okay what you're doing, but please don't do it again. And then when they do it again, like you said, maybe an hour later, they get caught selling drugs again. Well, what do? We give them a citation. Here's your flash citation. We'll see you in court in 2 months. What happens in 2 months? They don't show up either.
Right. Or they're being assholes the entire time, those 2 months. I mean,
So to me, lock them up. I mean, I had a conversation with somebody I believe it was Saturday at the Williamstown Fire Department. And we had an Orange County Republicans had a meet and greet there. It was a nice group of people. And somebody had posed the idea of privatized jails. Not a big fan of privatized jails. I know that many people aren't. But perhaps maybe we create a privatized jail for those that want to deal drugs. If you want to come from out of state or you want to deal drugs in bulk quantity here in the state of Vermont, maybe we set you up with the Vermont Hotel Suite, baby. You want to sell drugs? This is where you're going to sit. And at that point, it's out of my hands. You made that decision.
All right. Well, as we talk about drugs, one of the issues that drug use and it leads to homelessness, right?
It can.
It can. It doesn't always lead to homelessness, but it oftentimes does. Drug use. And as most people know, and as a counselor, you know this, that drugs is also a problem in the city, but also homelessness has become a huge problem in the city and what's happening on our streets.
Certainly.
What is your thoughts on the homeless crisis that Vermont is facing?
So I think that the homeless crisis has been something is like that bubble that's been waiting to be burst. That Vermont stopped producing housing really a hardcore housing in the 1990s and the early 2000s. They stopped that big housing push. And then they started to kind of turn that spigot on, but they didn't really turn it on enough. And then you have, again, the Act 250 reforms that came through this last biennium, and they really didn't do much for the rural communities. They let the more urban communities spread out or sprawl, but they didn't necessarily let the more rural communities sprawl. So that contributes to the lack of housing. It also, having COVID, that was a huge kick in the chops for people, because what we found, and during COVID I was the operations manager at the Salvation Army here in Barre, serving people food and making sure people got what they needed. And one of the things that I found out there was that people were couch surfing. A lot of people were living with relatives, with friends, not even having like their own place to call home. So they were living with people. And then COVID hit, and then we had free hotel rooms, which had positive and negative effects. So the people that were then couch surfing, they needed somewhere to go. So that way they could be safe as well, because we didn't really know what COVID was. So in that capacity, people then got out, and then they're separated. So then when you're separated from people, you're like, oh, this is kind of nice. I got my own room, got my space, I can jump around, and you have that opportunity, but then they don't ever really come back either. And then also when people come to the state of Vermont from other states because they hear about some of the wealth and programs that Vermont has with the social services opportunities. Across the border, you call 211, we'll get you into a hotel.
Right. They hear about the services. There's no wealth.
Yeah. I mean, I say wealth of services for somebody that's homeless in Massachusetts, Tennessee,
Alabama, Texas,
something like that.
Yep.
Hey, I got a $50 bus ticket. I'm going up to Vermont for a room. I have met people that have done that. Because Vermont was a beautiful place to be. Absolutely. But we want people to contribute to our beautiful place to be. We want you to continue to have Vermont be like Vermont. We don't want you to move from New Jersey and make Vermont New Jersey. There's a reason that you moved to Vermont. So homelessness, cooped with all of that, really the fact that we haven't been able to build in large scale is a huge issue. And if we could really build in large scale in some other places other than Burlington, like Chittenden County, if you go to Williston, they have apartments all over. It's amazing. You go to Winooski, same thing. They're building up. I grew up in Winooski, graduated from there in 2000. Couldn't really do anything sprawling-wise. What do? You build up. Barre needs to build up in some capacities so that way we can build more to that grand list. When we can build more housing, we give people places to live, but we also bring in more taxes. Lowers the tax for everyone else to have to pay. It brings in people that can then share the tax
as long as those
burden.
people can
They
share that burden,
and
they're not.
to share the burden. That's part of being in a community, is that we, as a community, share the burdens of everyone else. We make sure that if my neighbor's doing good, and this is something I learned working with Head Start, then I'm usually doing good as well. Because it means, like, if I can go over to my neighbor's house and ask them for a cup of sugar, things are all right with them. That means that next time maybe they need a cup of sugar, I can help them out too. So it's really just about being a community, and Vermont needs to be more community-oriented and everybody pitching in.
So when you say that, do you feel like we can continue to accommodate people continually coming into the state only for the services?
No. If you can't pay your fair share, there's a little bit of leeway there. Like, I understand about needing a hand up, and that's what I'm talking about. If you need a hand up, sure, let's give you a hand up. Let's help you pull your bootstraps up. Let's give you that opportunity that you need. But if you just want to drain our economy, no thanks. I mean, let's get you to a place where you can contribute. If there are actually things like mental illness, drug addiction, disability, there is a list of things that people will go through that they need help with in order to be employed, to have a house, to be able to drive or get to places. But if nobody's there to help them, how can they get there? But you have to want it.
Right. You have to want it. And then the question remains the same: is how many people can we help is the problem. And I have heart, even though most people think I don't. I definitely have heart. I have a big heart for people but I just want to take care of the people that are here already. I want to take care of them first. And that's my biggest concern, is that, we're just this big open door. Yeah, everybody come. And recently I have met with some people at Good Sam's and the entry program down here in Berlin on the Barre Montpelier Road, the new where the hotel used to be.
The Welcome Center.
The Welcome Center, and a few others, and they have discussed with me and others, and I've talked to law enforcement as well. About the last couple of months, we've had some influx of people coming, and when people say people are coming on a bus in the middle of the night, we're not talking, big Greyhound bus full of people. We're talking a small, like, church bus with 10, 15 people at a time. But if you get 3, 4 of them, that's a lot of people all of a sudden here in the city. And there's a big concern about that. Like, how many times can this happen?
Right.
So through these conversations, I've learned with people that obviously know, know and understand, because they are inundated and they can't help either. And now they're at a point where they're going, how are we going to do this? We can't help and because there's so many, we just don't know what to do.
Right.
And but I've learned that most states give you 90 days of like literal hand holding.
Yep.
And after that 90 days, you're kind of asked to, you have to do something in order to gain these services. You have to work in some sort of way to gain further assistance.
Yeah.
And when you don't want to, you just have nothing. And so that's when the churches, the local churches, will help send them places where they can get help.
Right.
And Vermont just happens to be one of those places that they get sent.
I think that it's difficult, that we want to help people, but we want to help the people first off that are here. And how do you differentiate between the two? You can't really. I mean, if you come, you come. I think something that we need to make very clear, or in my opinion, is that we need to stop giving money to panhandlers. New Hampshire has a law that we're not giving panhandlers. I think that behavior allows people to then come and say, hey, this is okay. But when someone gets hit by a car, is it okay? And I also think that those donations should go to an organization that then is going to help people. So if you're going to give somebody $20 on the side of the road,
That they're not buying a crack hit with it.
Yeah.
They're actually buying something that they need.
go down to the Salvation Army here in Keith Ave. Go talk to Caitlin or the other lieutenant. Give them the $20. They'll make sure it gets to somebody who needs it. And there are programs like the Salvation Army that vet people, that make sure that they're actually getting help that they need, and not just sitting on the side of the road asking for money, sitting there all day. Just last week, I went to McDonald's to grab lunch on break from the school, and there was a group of people standing there from Central America, had a sign, and I speak a decent amount of Spanish, and I'm asking them, like, where'd you come from? And he said, Indiana. I'm like, well, what? What do you need money for? I need money to survive. Like, wait a second. And then I asked him, I was like, well, can I bring you down to economic services? No. But that's the problem. So if we don't normalize giving money to people on the side of the road, if we normalize more so giving to these private nonprofits that are then going to utilize them in much better ways, I think it kind of changes that atmosphere, that we then become a community that, no, you're not welcome to panhandle in our state or in our community, but if you really need help, you can go to a United Way sponsored program like the Salvation Army and get some help. That's actually going to give you what you need to get better. Maybe you're struggling with who knows what, but that's a service that's available that if you want the help, they're there to help you.
All right. One problem that is plaguing the state of Vermont, and you touched on it, is our housing crisis.
Yeah.
The comment that you made was about Act 250 and how, our housing development has decreased, or not decreased, but we kind of hit like a
Big lull.
big lull in the 90s. The question for you is, how do you, as a state senator, plan to address the housing crisis that Vermont is currently facing?
I think first off, we need to stop just looking at Chittenden County. Like, I get it, that's where the majority of the state's votes are, but Burlington area is not a good place to live. I moved from that area because of the crime and the drugs and everything else, I think about 9 years ago, before I had my daughter Isabella, because Burlington just wasn't it. We need to stop building so much. If you go to Williston, Burlington, that area, and they're building all over. But if you go anywhere else in the state, they're not really building. And if we could build in some of those more rural areas, we could then bring their local economies better. We could bring them better. We could bring them up to par. And then the people that are struggling with poverty in these communities, because there's really no jobs, we can bring economic opportunities to them. So when we build housing, we can bring people, we can bring jobs. I mean, to me, if we can bring housing, people will be able to fill the jobs. When the jobs are full, the economy is much more full. Taxes are being paid at a better rate because people are spending more money. In general, if we can build more housing in a better way, and I'm not saying let's build all over Vermont because Vermont's beautiful, that we need to continue to keep the landscape how it is and build in a sensible way that is not out of control. Does that make sense?
So one of the things that Act 250 does is it tries to, because one of the things that everybody loves about Vermont is our green mountains.
Right.
And Act 250 is really what has caused our green mountains. And I think there's
Cause them to remain.
to remain.
Right.
Yes, to remain. And you think that we should redo Act 250 to make it? Are you suggesting like more development in the rural areas or on the outskirts of the urban areas?
So I'm suggesting that Act 250 gets a rehaul. That what I've heard from various news sources, especially Vermont Public, they've done a lot of stuff on Act 250. And the Act 250 is not a really clear-cut way. That two people could go in with the identical same project, and one could be denied, and one could be accepted. That's not a way to do business. Yeah. The way that Act 250 is done is really not a way that people want to come in and say, okay, I want to spend a bunch of money to put this project up for Act 250 permitting just for them to kick it out the door. Because there are no real clear-cut answers with Act 250. That's what I'm hearing from developers, is that when they want to build a project, they don't have like a checklist of things that they need to complete in order to apply for the Act 250 permit and boom, here's your permit. It's no, you need to go sit in a review. If you get your review. And there's just,
And it costs a lot of money.
And it does. It costs a lot of money. Where's that money going? And I don't know. I haven't had the opportunity to look at it. Somebody gave me some advice a couple years ago when I was running for state representative that really I stay an inch deep and a mile wide because I'm new to this. I don't have all the answers, but I'm willing to listen to people that are the experts that know what they're talking about.
And Act 250 is certainly very deep and very wide. It's not anything that is very cut and dry. But I mean, I've heard the same. I've heard complaints about the same. I've had, I have contractor friends that have been up against a wall many times because of some Act 250 permit. And it may come down to literal, a plant, a flower, a bug, a lizard that they found in that location that they don't want to issue a permit because they're protecting those things. And so there has to be, I mean, I understand that we want to keep things green and all, but there has to be a limit as to what we're protecting. Are we really, are we protecting the Green Mountains, or are we protecting a lizard because we're talking about a quarter acre of land that we're going to interrupt here? I mean, it's could put a kibosh to an entire project over something so small seems ludicrous to me too.
I think it's stopping development. It's stopping housing from being built. And when we're talking about being in a housing crisis, I'm not saying to just like release, hey, do whatever you
Free
want
for
with
all.
Act 250. No way. I don't want Vermont to look like New York or any of those other larger places. Like, I want Vermont to be Vermont. But we have to make sure that there are opportunities for people to live. And we don't see those. So it's an issue, and it's an even bigger issue for me where I've been looking to move out of public housing, and there's no starter houses. There are no opportunities for me to move into a house really that is going to be something that is not a real high middle class. I mean, I can't afford a $300,000 or $400,000 house, and we don't really see those opportunities for people. That we don't see the opportunities that people really need. The missing middle.
So you speak about that, and I'm just gonna push back on not push back, but comment on that missing middle. The 300 that you're right, $300,000 is like the starting price of a house, and is that because we have a lot of regulations that push that housing cost up? Because I know that you could have for a lack of a better term, crappier house for less.
Sure.
And I don't know if I have a strange suspicion that we're not building crappy houses anymore, and I think that's where, because they're not you don't get a lot of money off from them. I don't know if
I think it has to do with supply and demand. I mean, it's economy, that supply and demand. If you don't have enough supply, the demand to fulfill the demand, then the cost goes up per piece. And this is something that was taught in my economics class when I went back to CCV in 2020. Was that when you don't have enough of something, people then pay more for it. But if you have more of something, like if you have extra houses, and we don't have extra houses, but if we were building houses at a better pace, there would be more for people to choose from. It wouldn't just be, the house went on the market today and next week it's bought with cash. There would be houses that actually sit vacant for more than a month even, or apartments that would sit vacant and people would then have to try to rent them out. And I think that also goes to the fact with some of the prices in rent, that there aren't enough apartments. So landlords, and I'm not saying all landlords are like this, because I know a lot of amazing landlords here in Barre City that aren't like that, but there are some that know they can get more money, so they're gonna. They know that the demand is high and the supply is low, so the apartment that they would get $1,000 for, they might be able to get somebody to bid up to $2,000. Why? Because people, I don't want to say have disposable income,
but they need a
people
place
have
to
income, they need
live.
a place to live. So what do? Am I homeless, or do I pay $2,000 a month, dropping every penny I have into this apartment just to keep a roof over my head? So supply and demand need to change. That the demand needs to be lowered because the supply needs to increase. When we see that happen, I really feel like housing prices will lower. I also feel that apartment prices will lower, because when we have that equilibrium, and that's what we talk about in economics, is a price equilibrium. So when the price meets what people are willing to pay and the demand is there, the supply and the demand actually meet in a curve. So it's important in economics that the supply and the demand have a good balance. And what we don't see is the supply meeting the demand? So now we see things going up.
So regarding, you mentioned renting
Yep.
and the lack of rental units. The question that I have for you is I know that oftentimes landlords are starting to get out of the business because it's so difficult to deal with the Vermont laws regarding evictions
Oh, yeah.
and other portions of Vermont law. And it's easier just to do what Raylene has talked about, not her doing, but you've mentioned the Airbnbs and
Yep.
and stuff like that,
Short-term rentals.
rentals. How can you as a senator try to stem that tide where it's just easier and more profitable to rent to a visiting nurse on an Airbnb short-term rental than it is somebody
Spending
that's
thousands trying to evict somebody for 2 years.
So
Exactly.
Well, you're not getting
after
rent.
your house is
Yeah.
being trashed,
Yeah.
which
So-
is a huge problem. Houses are being trashed.
Yeah. My father just is in the process of selling his apartment on the corner of East and Eastern Ave here in Barre City. Number one, because he can't afford the property taxes, and number two, he has a tenant that hasn't paid rent in a while. He has one tenant that's really good. He has another tenant that sucks. And who has to pay that? Well, my father does. Because even though the tenant's not paying, my father still has a mortgage, still has insurance, still has taxes, a water
And
bill,
he's still
sewer
got to keep
bill.
it heated so that the pipes
he
don't
doesn't-
freeze
well,
and burst and
yeah.
cause more problems for himself. Or, you've got to keep the power on. If it gets shut off, you want to be the first to know because you don't want to have a bunch of other problems because of those things happening.
It's bad.
There's a lot that
So I
a
think
landlord
that-
deals with.
Landlords need more rights. That it would be really helpful to have a better justice system, shall we call it, for landlords to bring their complaints to judges. That it takes way too long for a landlord to evict a tenant. But I also think that there are times when a landlord evicts a tenant with no cause, and those aren't always good either. That there are some good no-cause evictions, and I think that there are some really crappy ones. And I think that is based on the landlord that you have.
But there's got to be some sort of quicker process
Yeah.
to say,
well, you
this is
figure-
what we've got going on here.
Let's talk about this drug house at Green Acre. You know what we were talking about with DEA, ATF. Kicking in the door and busting the window. They continue to live there. They couldn't evict them. This is what I was told, and that's because of the laws, and whether it be the federal laws, the state laws, prohibited them from being able to just kick them right out the door after they had a raid. So they continue to do things. They continue to spray paint on the walls, the windows, put holes in walls, and trash the place. And at that point, the landlord is Barre Housing. It's not a private landlord like my father who would have to pay that. So we're talking about money that's coming out of taxpayers' money, essentially. So then let's
To
put
repair.
it. Yep. So now let's put it on the private end. So let's say, for example, that my father did have one of his tenants that decided, you know what, I'm mad at Mike during the first today, so I'm gonna smash out this window. I'm mad the next day. What is he gonna do? They're gonna put a hole in the wall. Well, then my father's gonna have to go in before he rents it out. He's gonna have to replace the window. He's gonna have to repair the wall. All of these things, just because he couldn't get them out because they're not paying rent. There has to be a better way for our landlords to take possession of what's theirs. Bottom line.
Speaking of landlords, to me, being a landlord is a small business
Sure.
for sure. That's what people choose to do as a business.
Yeah.
What do you feel? Do you feel that Vermont is small business or business friendly? And if you don't, what can we do?
I don't feel that Vermont is business friendly. We constantly talk about Vermont first. Something that was really drilled into my head growing up in Winooski was buy local, Vermont first. Really that Vermont mentality. But what we've seen is that the legislature thinks that we can keep taking money from these people. We can keep squeezing them as much as we possibly can until they say uncle. And then even after they say, I can't pay you anymore, we squeeze you some more and more and more. now these small businesses, you see them pop up here on Main Street. They'll pop up for a little while, and they'll go out of business. Another one will come in, go out of business. And meanwhile, people are complaining about, well, why don't we have businesses on Main Street? Maybe if we incentivize businesses, we then incentivize our economy, it brings more money locally, and it also brings more money to the state.
And jobs.
I mean, it just, in general, when you can get more people involved in the workplace, you are doing so much for your local communities. This is really what was taught in my global social problems class at CCV. That when you're able to better the economy of a community, typically you're also allowing them to come up, to rise with that tide. Because everybody in the community then raises up when you bring more jobs, when you bring more housing, more opportunities. It gives people the opportunities that they need to flourish. If you're in a community like Barre and there's really nothing for you to work towards, then what's the initiative? What's the goal? I mean, is there anything that you're really looking for? Or is it just, it's just another day in my life? But no, I mean, if you can wake up and have a job and have a purpose, you have, some passion for that. I wake up every day. I'm blessed to be the transportation sub-coordinator here at the Barre City School, and I'm really thankful for that. It gives me that drive and desire, and I think if we can give more people those drive and desires with the local jobs, with the big-time jobs, if we can build our economy up, we build everybody else up around us.
All right. So certainly one big thing that's, Barre City focused is flood mitigation. So do you want to speak on any type of flood mitigation thoughts for you as a senator?
Yeah. So since flooding went on last year in Barre, I've taken many phone calls from people that don't live here in the city because they feel like I'll listen to them. And something that we've been talking about is working on a regionalized approach to watershed management. This is something I brought up a couple weeks ago to, I think it was Pat Moulton, the Central Vermont Recovery Officer, was what are we doing to look at more of watershed mitigation, watershed management, not just with what Barre City does or what Williamstown or Montpelier, but what are we doing as a regional watershed? Because then we can also bring more money to the table. Because we know that all of our communities that are along the watershed, they don't have money. But if we as a group of communities can come together, we can then potentially pull more money down from the federal government. Those programs are very difficult and quite frankly are just a pain in the ass. FEMA is horrible. FEMA hasn't really done a whole lot with Barre. They actually sent Barre City a letter like 2 months ago saying that we weren't working fast enough. And then Nicholas, the city manager, sent FEMA a letter back with our blessing saying, look, no, you guys haven't been working fast enough. Your staff has constantly turned over. You're not getting money out fast enough. We're giving you projects.
Right. And we need support.
Yeah, and we need these things. But where are you?
Yeah.
So then we saw FEMA issue some more money. We need better mitigation programs. And as long as I've lived in Vermont, we've never really talked about flooding. We've never talked about how are we going to mitigate flooding. Why? Because we've never thought that flooding was going to happen. 1927, the last flood here in Barre City. Besides what we had, Irene.
Well, we had
a couple of floods.
We haven't had 100-year floods since 1927.
Serious floods that we're talking about on a constant basis. So we've had some natural disasters with flooding. But to the scale that we've seen, like for example, when the Winooski River crossed in Waterbury with an ice jam back in the mid-90s, we haven't been able to see a lot of those, but now we're seeing them more frequently. And they haven't been to people's mind because they don't think about it. It's not something like down south where you get prepared for a hurricane every year. Well, now it's on our minds because now we're having to deal with these things. And now we've worked 100 years or so to build close to the rivers. Now it's going to take some time for us to build off of the rivers. It's going to take us some time to figure out how the water flows, which way it flows, but also making sure that when we're building the impervious surfaces, that we also have good stormwater runoff systems, that our communities, our larger communities like Barre City, that the infrastructure has the money it needs to do its job. That we saw this last December with the flooding that was going to be potential. The couple of hours that had the lull allowed the stormwater to work its way through and didn't continue to flood the rest of the city. Unfortunately, we didn't have that time before. So to have that time was great, but now we need to continue to look and see, well, what can we do regionally to make sure that when we have flooding, that it's as mitigated as possible. That we need to really put programs into place that we can get things accessible to people, really get information out to people, that if you haven't really had to deal with things so often, we don't really have that constant knowledge or memory. So I think having those information sessions can be important. Just constantly being prepared for stuff and knowing that it could happen.
All right. Well, we are hitting almost an hour here. Raylene, do you have a question that's, I do want to point out that Nancy says Nancy Dutel.
Yeah.
4 floods in 34 years.
Yeah.
I understand, Nancy. And you have definitely had it really hard down there. You know, dredge the rivers, used to in the past, why not anymore? And saving the fish is not the answer. Julie Moore, the secretary for the Agency of Natural Resources, said, you know what? It's not about the fishes. It's about we got to make sure we're saving human life. So if it means that we're maintaining the riverbed selectively, those are some things that the state's now looking at. That we have to open those opportunities of what were we doing before to help fix things. We need to listen.
I'm going to lose my shit over this.
Yeah?
I'm going to lose my shit over it because it really irritates me. The fact is that Barre City, we talk about riverbed maintenance because we can't say the D word.
We can't say dredge, yep.
Right. So we talk about that and everybody brings up the studies about how it erodes the side of the riverbank.
Right.
But I would love to see the study which shows the erosion of the riverbank when there's slabs of granite.
See, and that's what we
Because they're
talked
man-made riverbeds.
Well, we talked
Right.
about that
It's
at
not-
City
it's more of
Council
a
couple weeks
spillway.
ago, with the river group that had come in.
Excuse my
because-
language, by the way.
You're all right. So Barre has those man-made canal systems, really, that aren't really river systems. So that's something that we are trying to look at, and it's going to cost a boatload of money. But a hydrology and a hydraulic, oh man.
I don't remember the
hydrology
two terms
and
either.
I can't even say the words. Sorry, I've been going since 5 this morning.
That's right. I mean, and we know, no matter what you want to call them, canals, rivers, brooks, whatever, they're overflowing and they're a problem and they need help because they are not as deep as they once were.
No, we definitely need to take that stuff out. I mean, figure it out. If we need to go make a dump for it, I'm not really advocating for that. But if that's the worst case scenario, that we're going to go find, dump it in the middle of nowhere and it saves human life, get it done. The people of Barre, the people of Montpelier, the people of Lindenville, Plainfield, people don't deserve this stuff. And where we've seen no progress in mitigating these things, really, we've talked about, well, let's raise some people's houses up. Let's throw $1 million into the Barre City general fund, so that way we can help, pad that. But what are we really doing so that people down on Main Street aren't going to flood this July? Because 2 July 10ths in a row, we flooded. So what are we doing as a state to help mitigate that regionally?
And we could keep you here all night long because now I have like a million things from City Council last week that just zipped through my head and I'm thinking, oh damn, we've got him right here in the hot seat. But we won't. You have kids that you got to get home, and I'm sure we have great people like Glenn that we're keeping way up past his bedtime. So, but yeah, one last plug for yourself, I guess, right?
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
So
Give it to us.
first and foremost, if you have any questions, comments, or whatever, reach out to me. I'm still using deeringforbarre@gmail.com, deeringforbarre@gmail.com. You can send me an email there. You can reach out to me on my Facebook page. I really don't do a lot on Facebook. I post a lot, but I really don't scroll a lot. I really don't get too much of the comments and stuff back. I'm flat out busy. But you can call my cell phone. You can text me, 802-461-3231. My cell phone number is everywhere. My email address is everywhere. If you have something to say, I want to hear it. My campaign slogan really is listening twice as much as I speak. The biggest issue that I see in this last biennium is that our legislators aren't representing us, that they're not displaying representative democracy, that they're not listening to what the voters have to say. They're doing what they want. And to me, if I'm elected to be your next Washington County state senator, I'm going to listen twice as much as I speak. I'm available constantly. So I would love to represent you in Montpelier. And if you have any questions, comments, or even concerns, feel free to reach out to me, call me, text me, send me an email, Facebook message.
Comment here.
Comment
You'll
here.
keep track.
Yeah. See me in the community. Talk to me. I'm at all kinds of events. I love being out in public. So I hope to see you all there. And vote for me. Ballots for Barre City went out are in the mailboxes today. Got mine at home. I'll be bringing that to the polls on November 4th in person.
And you don't always have to bring it to the polls. You can bring it down to the drop box behind City Hall, or you can hand deliver it to someone at City Hall, or you can mail it back, or you could call your friend. They would definitely take it.
Absolutely.
We definitely want to see as many votes as we possibly can get in there.
Yeah.
And thank you, Michael, for joining us on the Barre Beat tonight.
Appreciate
it's
you.
always a pleasure to have you here. And we want to say thank you to everybody for watching the Barre Beat live, Main Street, Barre, Vermont, from the
Inside Scoop Studio.
Inside Scoop
Yeah,
Studio.
we're on 802 Scoop live from the Inside Scoop Studio.
Hey.
And the Inside Scoop, someday we're gonna out that pretty soon.
Okay.
Everybody will know what it all means.
Have a great night, folks.
Remember in November.